Hello and welcome to this edition of the Championship Talk podcast. We've got a lot to talk about, but first let me introduce myself. I'm your host Paul O'Toole, and joined virtually opposite me is my co-host Thomas Falco.
Hello!
So we're going to start with the breaking news. If you've been hiding under a rock, you won't have seen it. Everyone else, obviously the revision of the tiers, and probably more importantly in terms of the Championship, the London clubs, and London as a borough being moved in, or as a city being moved into Tier 3, which will prevent spectators being able to go to games. Obviously, this takes effect from 1 minute past midnight on Wednesday morning. So any team in the London area that was due to play and fans that were due to or thought they were going to go to those games now subsequently can't go. Now, we want to caveat this with the fact that at the moment, this is sort of as we're recording, the news is we still don't know how far a reach this will have. So for instance, obviously, we would expect this to affect Watford, QPR. However, we don't know whether it's going to go as far as Luton. So there will be a definitive list probably come out tomorrow. But it's sad, isn't it? We were getting used to having fans back in the stadiums. The weekend's fixtures was noticeable with clubs with fans in and clubs that didn't, and the games that had fans were more enjoyable.
Yes, they were. Watching the highlights there, the one that stood out to me particularly was Luton against Preston. We'll talk about that later on, but the crowd there, that seemed like a lot more than 2,000 as well. That was very, very loud. But no, it's very much a fluid news event at the minute, isn't it? I mean, it's going to change in 2 weeks again, so there could be more teams added to that, more areas added to that. Could be other teams taken out of that and moved into Tier 2, so we just got to wait and see. But it's obviously very hard when at this stage people just want to get back to some form of normal, and it's changing on a bi-weekly basis. We were talking about off air how it's affected the World Darts Championship that starts tomorrow at Ali Pali. We'll sort of, well, I like my darts, I don't think you really watch it, Paul, but you could have one day of the fans there, and then from that it's just going to be quiet. And as you've said, the atmosphere makes sport what it is, and the fact that you've got clubs, well, all these clubs in London are going to be affected by that. I was seeing what Frank Lampard was saying earlier on as well about looking at what could be done to maybe counteract things like that, but obviously health has to come first, and we understand why this is happening. Just hope we can get back on track sooner rather than later. You know, it's very negative, and football is nothing without the fans, is it? And for them to be there for these last couple of games we've watched has really made a difference, made it more excitable and more, I don't know if it's easier to watch, because obviously we love football regardless, but definitely having the fans there adds to the atmosphere and maybe gives that edge as well, doesn't it?
Feels more normal. Feels more normal. And that's part of it. You say fluid, that's, you know, COVID has been shit. I'll need the bleep button that at 2:08. Yeah, so I think it's incredibly sad, and I think that it's obviously the decisions are being made for the right reasons. They're being made to protect people's health, and you know we absolutely agree with that. But it's you know, we want it done and out of the way. But I don't think we'll have to get used to this. Obviously, the games that don't have the fans, it's noticeable. So we're going to move on to some other news. And this is the EFL have appointed a new chief executive. So Trevor Birch will become the new EFL chief executive from the 1st of January 2021. The EFL chairman, Rick Parry, said he's delighted to be able to welcome Trevor Birch on board. Trevor's vast experience has impressed me throughout our discussions in regard to the role, and having been a strong candidate in 2019 before withdrawing from the process, I'm delighted that he's opted to take the position. He is able to join the league so promptly. I thank Daniel Levy for his understanding this respect. Obviously, Trevor Birch is currently in employment by Tottenham Hotspur. So
yes, he's the director of football operations, isn't he? At Tottenham at the moment,
and given where Tottenham are in the Premier League, and given their current successes, given where they were from sort of a nearly ran club to currently top of the Premier League. Clearly, he's done some good work there. So it'll be interesting to see what powers and scope that he will have. Obviously, the chairman is Rick Parry. The EFL definitely need to do something to sort out the direction and kind of marketability. I think that's what we've talked about in the past. When we go back to the TV rights deals, listen to previous podcasts, because I went into far too much detail around the finances. However, when you look at the potential for the EFL to make make the sums of money that the Premier League makes. Certainly when it's the fourth most supported league in Europe, you would expect it to have the finances behind it that would mirror that. We said that we felt the Premier League was that the EFL, or certainly the Championship, was undersold as a product when it negotiated its TV rights deal. I would say mark a success. Secure a better deal in 2024.
Yeah, I mean,
and
it's
probably
very
one worth of the quality of football that we see.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting when you look into Trevor Birch's history. 61 years old, he's going to replace David Baldwin, who steps down on the 31st of December. So there's a nice little day's grace there. So, not sort of treading on each other's toes. But his background, he's been a chief executive. He's been a chief executive of Chelsea, Everton, Leeds, Sheffield United, and Derby, and has also been the chairman of Swansea. He has a financial background, so obviously that comes into the reckoning when you look at this. And as you've talked about the TV deals, etc., and especially in the situation that I think all sports find themselves in at the minute with the COVID crisis and the financial impact that's having on all teams at all levels, I think someone like that coming in with his background and his nous and his reputation can only be a good thing as well. And we'll see how that pans out over the next 3 months. I think will be the acid test, but give him time to see if he can make an impact. But I'm sure he comes with a fantastic reputation. He says there is a big job to be done dealing with the effect of the pandemic, together with participating in discussions on the future structure of football, and I hope I can make a meaningful contribution to that process. So we'll wait and see what impact he certainly has on the EFL in the coming months.
You're the segue king, because we move into finance. We want to keep on the finance sort of theme, and there will be more talk around football finance probably as we go into February and March, because I think it's going to, depending on how the new year starts with this fluid virus. I think it's probably the best way to not to get a strike from Google. It'll be interesting to see whether second waves and additional restrictions have on clubs' finances, and he's going to earn his money early on. However, we move into finances. We talked briefly when we discussed the EFL bailout package that there were some clubs that were against it. It's been reported that the clubs that were against the bailout package for a number of reasons were Preston, Brentford, Luton, Millwall. They led opposition to the EFL's Premier League funded bailout package and argued that it was a package designed to help owners guilty of overspending that would leave all more beholden to the demands of the Premier League. There's also anger in the Championship that if any lower division club defaults on the monitored grants they receive, the rest of the EFL clubs potentially could be held liable. It's interesting when you look at Preston, Brentford, Luton, Millwall, the first thing that comes to mind is they are all clubs in a very sound financial position, or seems to be, and they are clubs that would traditionally perhaps be selling clubs. They tend to make a lot of money, or they certainly make a lot of funds from the recruitment and successful recruitment of players. They also are clubs that have all, you probably track their trajectory of the last 5 years, and again, need to bow to your knowledge, Thomas, on this. Those would be 4 clubs. Their trajectory over the last 5-6 years would definitely be an upward trajectory based on a solid footing. They've all had long-standing managers, so there's a common theme there. Now, I wanted to, the kind of discussion I wanted to have. Thank you for Gandalf for pointing us in this direction. I know that the tweet you had, and you copied you tweeted a lot of the Championship podcasts, and it definitely gained a lot of traction, because I think it's an interesting discussion that probably the 4 clubs we're mentioning aren't necessarily going to take advantage of the grant. And I think that's interesting in itself, because it could potentially, and we said this at the time, it potentially could paper over some cracks that would have been there without COVID. And I think this is what these 4 clubs are saying.
Yes, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. You've took all my material, really. These are clubs who traditionally don't take risks in their spending. I mean, you look especially at Luton, they've worked their way back up from a situation where they were in dire financial straits and then well, we all know what happened to Luton. They went down to what is now the National League, didn't they? And they've had to work their way back up to the Championship as well, and they've done so with a sound financial footing. And the other clubs you've mentioned as well, I'm surprised there are a couple of other clubs who are not involved in there as well, because we've had a lot of talk over the months in this podcast, and indeed seasons in this podcast, where there are certain clubs, if they're not mentioned in that forum, I'm not going to name them, but they're very vocal with teams who have broken financial fair play regulations. Yeah, I can see why clubs maybe don't want to have to rely on bailouts from the higher leagues, but
do you think it's them 4 clubs? And so, obviously, these are the 4 reported clubs. Obviously, this is a report from a report from it won't have there will be clubs that had similar thinkings, probably didn't voice their opinions. I'd say these are the 4 clubs that fly less close to the wire in terms of their finances. They're probably 4 clubs that have a contingency for relegation. Now, that's ludicrous to think Brentford would do that. However, given Brentford's trajectory in the last 3 or 4 years has been exponential growth, new stadium, etc., and it's been so good having fans in that new stadium, but ultimately, brand new stadium that's only had, I think, 2 home games, 4,000 fans, when it's almost double the capacity of Griffin Park. And you think, Tottenham are struggling, and they built a new stadium. They spent probably close to their means, and it's they were going to have NFL games in their stadium. Brentford didn't have any of that. They were clearly within their means and have subsequently sold players at significant profits to bridge that gap. And I'd say that these 4 clubs fly less close to that wire of we need to earn X, otherwise we're in trouble. They probably have a better handle on their costs, and that does mean they take less risks. And that does then, you take less risks, your chances of the promised land of the Premier League is less.
Yeah, I mean, it can be done. It's very, very rare that teams don't go above and beyond their financial means. You look at the likes of Norwich, maybe, for example, are a club who do it without taking so much risks, because they always make sure their books are well sort of balanced, don't they? I mean, you're more financial than me, so you understand this evidently a lot more than I ever will. But I think it's one to watch this space as well, because we have to wait and see what the impact is. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but we have to wait and see what would indeed happen if one club who takes advantage of this bailout scheme from the Premier League has to default a payment. I think that's when we see what really happens and what the repercussions are going to be. We don't want
gambling,
that.
Man.
You've
followed lower division football at a lot more detail than I have. It's likely that that's going to happen, isn't it?
I would like to think not, but I mean, the times
history would tell you otherwise.
When clubs are moving from tier 2 to tier 3 and they can't have any fans in, let alone the 1,000, 2,000, depending on which area they're in, or indeed the 4,000. But I don't think there are any clubs in this country I don't think there are any clubs at all, are there, who actually have who are in tier 1. There's only a couple of places in the whole of the UK.
Cornwall and the Isle of Wight don't have football teams, not at this level.
No. Yeah, I don't like being negative when it comes to stuff like this, but the last time I can remember this on such a significant scale, I don't know if you can remember, was the fallout from the ITV Digital collapse. And
I do, and again, this shows how far back we go. We were at college, and to me, it just seemed ludicrous that a TV company going into administration affected your team, Forest. And we remember having conversations.
To be fair, I don't want to have a debate about this now because we don't have enough time, and the listeners probably don't want to hear it. But at the time with ITV Digital, you probably didn't care because it didn't affect Arsenal, and I don't mean that in a nasty way. If it doesn't affect your club, right, you're not gonna care. But you look down at that money that was promised at that particular money that was promised, and teams went ahead and spent it, and then it just wasn't there, and it took a lot of clubs a lot of time. Some maybe didn't even recover and get back to where they were before. We don't want that to happen this time round because of COVID. Obviously, look on the positive. You look at the vaccinations that are coming into effect. Hopefully that builds up some sort of resistance and we can get back to some form of normality again. No one knows how long that's going to be until that happens, but as I said, it's just a case of waiting and see. I don't like to speculate. You are right. I am a gambler man, and the chances are there will be one team who probably will struggle to remake payments when the time comes. But that's hopefully football's
interesting to
back
see
to
the rest of
normal
the
by the time that
championship
becomes
rally
an issue.
around that one club. That will be the acid test. Now you want to move on to the sad passing of Gerard Houllier.
Yes, again,
this happened today.
I said to you off air that this isn't about the championship. It's more. Sometimes we're about more than the championship, and this particular person is always spoke of as a gentleman when it comes to football. Gerard Houllier passed away today at the age of 73. He was still working in football. I didn't even know this. He was head of global football for Red Bull. That was all of the clubs entailed with Red Bull. So Red Bull Salzburg, Red Bull Leipzig as well, and all of them types of affiliates. Yes, and was last month appointed technical director of Olympique Lyonnais Féminine and Olympique Lyonnais Serein. Of course, we know him from his spell at Liverpool, where he first come to Liverpool, I believe it was 1998, when he took joint charge of Liverpool with Roy Evans, and then Roy Evans stepped aside a few months later and Gerard Houllier took sole charge. He won the FA Cup, 2 League Cups, Charity Shield, UEFA Cup and UEFA Super Cup with Liverpool, an unprecedented treble as well. We remember that, the UEFA Cup final against Alaves, I think that was 5-4, wasn't it? Yeah, absolutely crazy.
I remember the FA Cup final personally, but I'm still a bit salty about that. But we'll carry on.
But you look through his managerial career. He started in 1973, and he was pretty much working non-stop in management from 1973 to I think that's 2011, roughly, with Aston Villa. But Le Touquet went on to Noulamine Lens, PSG, France, the national side, famous for not making the World Cup in '94. Then Liverpool, Lyon, and Aston Villa. And he, of course, had major heart surgery, didn't he, when he was manager of Liverpool, and come back very, 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 very bravely as well. Went on to further success, and then went to Aston Villa, and then had to retire because of issues surrounding his health. He also won Ligue 1 on 2 occasions, the Trophée des Champions on 2 occasions, and the UEFA European Under-18s with France, and one of the few imports from Europe to come to this country and actually become an officer of the Order of the British Empire for his work for football. So he was recognised on all levels. You've only got to read the comments that are on Twitter and all types of social media and news, reputable news sources and indeed unreputable news sources. I don't think there's anyone who's got a bad word to say about him. And football today mourns the passing of a good manager and a very, very lovely man by all accounts, of Gerard Houllier, who has sadly passed away today at the age of 73. Our thoughts and condolences to friends and family of Gerard Houllier.
Yeah. So that concludes our Championship Talk news podcast video, whatever you call it. I lose track these days. It's hard to work out what to call it. If you like the video, please leave us a thumbs up. If there's anything you want us to cover, if there's anything you think that we can build in, absolutely leave us a comment down below. Obviously, if you want to keep listening to this and listen to our History of series, which the episode for Birmingham just went up, so that's Barnsley and Birmingham. I think Christmas Eve I'll drop the Blackburn episode because we have recorded that already, and then we're going to move on to Bournemouth and Bristol City. That will be early in the new year. So absolutely, if you want to catch those as they come out, hit the subscribe button. I tend to drop them at random times because time. But as always, also catch the main podcast, which is way too long, always rambly. We pronounce a lot of players' names wrong because we're so tired. That's on any kind of podcast streaming.
You can't see my face, can you? At the minute, you'll see that for the edit. What a way to sell our podcast and the hard work we indeed put into it. Fantastic, mate.
Over 100 episodes, tens of thousands of people listen to us, but we've clearly got our selling points. At Championship TA1, that will be on the screen somewhere. So thank you all for watching, and we shall speak to you all next week. Check out the History of podcast because that was really fun to record. I like that. We want to do more of them. Okay, speak to you later. Bye.
Bye.